Testing. Hello. See if I can get this microphone working. See if this is working now. Testing. Okay. All right, it's working. Good. Would you believe it's been since September last year since I've done one of these? I thought I did one in December already. Nevertheless, I'm only going to talk about what I've read in January and February this year, as otherwise the video will be 6 hours long, and nobody's got enough time to wait for that. So hope you all are having a good weekend. I don't think anybody's in yet anyway. So if you're watching this later after it's streamed, then hopefully it isn't too long. I always try and promise that these streams aren't going to be too long, but they always end up going over my intended goal of keeping it at least under an hour. Anyway, I've only got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different series that I read this past couple of months, and it's really not that much. I read as and when I can. But unfortunately, it's not every single day as much, as I would like to. Sometimes I go a couple of days without reading anything, but there's a good enough selection. Some single volumes of manga, some collected series. Yeah, a nice little hodgepodge of action, short stories, romance, sports, historical, fiction and non-fiction. Considering it's only 8 titles, there's a nice little varied mix. So the first thing that I remember reading in January was Emerald and Other Stories by Hiroaki Samura. I've been looking for this volume for years, in fact, and unfortunately it's gone off print now. But the title story, Emerald, is pretty cool. It features this young girl on the main cover here, and she's her parents are dead, and she's caught between a rock and a hard place in that she's offered a gamble that she's got absolutely no way of winning, and calls upon these 2 hard-boiled, seasoned cowboys and cow lady to try and rescue her from a predicament. So it's a really interesting title story, but doesn't make up for the majority of the volume. The rest of the I guess the other stories in it make up the majority of the volume. Some of them I hit or miss. There's a really interesting one that deals with a really unusual relationship between a daughter and a father, and revelations that come out into the open after the passing of her mother, and the kind of man that her father is. It's a pretty sick story if you're into things like sadomasochism and unusual sexual fetishes, which is unusual to see, I guess, coming from a short story like this. But from what I recall, there were really unusual moments like that in Blade of the Immortal as well. I mean, it's been quite a couple of years now since I've read that, but I'm sure there were inklings of like fetishization and sort of gratuitous sex within Blade of the Immortal. So certainly stories like that aren't for the faint of heart. A lot of the stories featured, there was sort of like an ongoing short story series featuring 2 young schoolgirls, or like kind of high school age girls, that was supposed to be kind of comedic in nature, but Samura's flair for comedy just didn't really resonate with me. I guess it's just not my sort of style of comedy. It was more like offbeat, nonsensical kind of humor. I guess that maybe young Japanese schoolgirls could relate to. I don't know. It just didn't, it didn't fit right with me. I'm not really into that kind of humor. And a couple of other interesting stories with a little sprinkling of light science fiction. which is nice. So all in all, it was a pretty good little short story collection. Definitely not something I would pay over retail price for. I was very lucky to come across this for £10 after mistakenly buying it in French, realizing it was out of print. So I did have to track it down, but I didn't pay any more than what a reasonable price for it would normally go for anyway. So yeah, and it's nice to own more Himuraki Samura manga in my collection. I mean, the artwork is really nice. You know, he's not one of them kind of creators who struggles with facial differentiation. You know, sometimes you have artists who are absolutely masters at creating characters and you know, character creation, but you know, everyone's just got the same face. Samura, thankfully, is not one of those kind of artists. You're very much aware of who's who. I mean, sometimes the girls can look quite similar, but for the most part, given that the short stories, you know, you're very much acutely aware that the different characters anyway. But yeah, Emerald, not really anything to sing home about. The title story, Emerald, is probably the best one out of the ones that I read. So that's that. Let's just check on YouTube, make sure this video is all still going tip top. Pretty quiet today, so I don't think I have anyone watching, but that's all good. It's fine. I mean, this sort of stream is just on a whim. I need to get it out before the end of February. So yeah, no bother. So let's see. The next thing I read was Seraphim, A Ton of Wings. Let's see if I can actually read what this number is. 266,613,336 wings. There you go. So it's co-authored both by Mamoru Oshii and Satoshi Kon. Mamoru Oshii being the famous director of Ghost in the Shell and Pat Labor, as well as many other larger and smaller projects. And Satoshi Kon being Satoshi Kon, famous anime director. And this was their collaborative piece. Oh gosh, that ran in Animage, the same magazine that Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was published in. And this was the intention of the editors wanting to publish this was they wanted something to succeed or carry on the legacy and the praise that Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind got. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is more like pseudo-futuristic fantasy, and they wanted to go with a similar theme, but have it more sci-fi, I guess, where Nausicaa falls short of that. There's not really much sci-fi in it other than sort of gliders and things like that. This one is a lot more sci-fi and sort of grounded in reality to a degree. And it's basically, I mean, to sort of summarize what's the very little of what the story is, because bearing in mind that this unfortunately is incomplete on account of Satoshi Kon sort of veering in, you know, a different direction in that he wanted to focus more on his anime. So, I mean, this stopped serialization in like the mid 90s, like 94, 95. And neither of them ever picked it back up again, unfortunately. But what we get of the story is set in a post-apocalyptic world where a disease has ravaged the human population, and those who remain reside in, I guess, quarantine zones. There's a specific name for it. They live in these sort of like Kowloon City sort of things. I think that's the name of a city where it's just literally just like hyper dense apartment blocks all sort of squeezed in together, and everyone outside of that is suffering from this disease, which induces a state of hysteria or like dementia. People basically just become comatose, and start sprouting wings out of their back, and then eventually just sort of crystallize into basically like a statue, as you can sort of see on the main cover there. That's like one of the victims of this seraphim disease. Seraphim being one of the, like a type of like an order of angels of God. So there are a lot of religious, there's lots of religious symbolism, and it all centers around this young girl here, this mute girl who is accompanied by academics and military personnel. And we're not really sure exactly what power she has, but she seems to be resistant to this virus. It's killing everyone else. It's an incurable virus, but she's the only one who's resistant to it, and they're trying to find out why. So it's that interspersed with a lot of political intrigue, and conversations around philosophy, like lots of characters philosophizing and sort of bouncing ideas between each other, which is sort of standard for both Satoshi Kon and Mamoru Oshii, particularly the latter. I mean, if you've seen the end of Ghost in the Shell, then it's nothing but that, just philosophizing about the meaning of the human soul and that sort of thing. So it's very much there's a lot of things that in this story that are recognizable in a lot of the movie and anime works from both of these directors. Unfortunately, both of them had some kind of dispute between each other over who had the rights and who should get the main writing credit for this. As from what I read of, this also has an essay by I think it's Frederick L. Schott. It's either no, it's not Frederick L. Schott. It's Carl Gustav Horn, who's the editor of this. He has a really interesting essay at the back of this, and it basically goes into like a lot of the details surrounding how this came to be, why it was published, the sort of the landscape of the anime and manga medium at the time, and the sort of it skirts around the issue of Oshii and Kon having a dispute regarding, like I said, who should have the main author credit for this, and it was an issue that they never managed to resolve. Obviously, it's not. It was never finished, and it doesn't have a semi-satisfying ending like Satoshi Kon's other series Opus did. That one had a pretty cool meta ending. This one doesn't. This one just ends very abruptly. So it wasn't a satisfying conclusion at all. Even though it sort of played around with some really fun and cool ideas. The artwork, typical of Satoshi Kon, is very refined, very clean. Not much sort of interesting panel work, but some really cool character sort of designs, and lots of focus on the eyes and the human face and all that sort of stuff. It's interesting. You've got some pretty cool action scenes as well, which sort of harp back to Satoshi Kon's time on Akira. So yeah, for what it is, it was cool. I mean, the best thing out of it really is the essay at the back. It's a very detailed and long essay. I may need to give it a reread because it's sort of it's set in post-apocalyptic China, and it goes into like real life history of like Chinese communism and the split between China and Taiwan, and it's very, very in depth. So I think if anything, get this for the essay. It's very informative if you're sort of interested in real world and fictionalized geopolitics. So that was Seraphim, Many Wings. I saw Bakamatsu, Pedro. Hey, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for joining. Yeah, this stream's hopefully not going to be too long, and it was. I needed to get it out this weekend. If I hadn't have recorded and streamed this weekend, then I wouldn't have been able to do it at all, and then it would have been at the end of March, where I'm talking about things that I read in January, February, and March. And that's far too much for one stream, if you ask me. So this is a little bit off the cuff, entirely on a whim, and I'm just kind of winging it as usual, just sort of talking about what I actually remember of these series. As my short-term memory is terrible. Anywho, talking. It's funny that you're here, Bakamatsu, because next time I'm going to talk about this. So I was just talking about Mamoru Oshii and how he directed Ghost in the Shell. So obviously this is the original, what the films are sort of based off of. I guess this hasn't been adapted into any other medium at all. This is its own story. This is Ghost in the Shell 2, Man-Machine Interface, which is essentially a sequel to the original Ghost in the Shell manga. Now, from what I remember of the Ghost in the Shell manga, I don't like using the word parallel, but the ending of the film and the ending of the manga are kind of akin to each other. It ends in roughly the same way, with the Major and the Puppet Master sort of merging into one entity, and this sort of loosely follows that. And the main character on the cover is Motoko Aramaki, or at least that's what she calls herself. And she's it's set a couple of years after the end of Ghost in the Shell, and it's presumed that she's the amalgamation of the Puppet Master and the Major from the original series. However, she may be more. There may be more entities that she's merged with since then. So she's very much her own character, and there's not really that much of her of a recognizable personality where you can sort of say, yes, that's very clearly the Major. It might as well be a completely different character. And story-wise, the story is very convoluted. To explain it in its broadest terms, the Major now works wholly independently. She's an independent military contractor, no longer affiliated with, was it Section 9 or Section 13? I can't remember the name of it, but basically the agency that she was the anti-terrorist agency that she was a member of in the original series. She now functions independently, taking on contracts from different nations to like stop different terrorist groups. And there's a humanist terrorist group that is like completely against human, basically altering your body to enhance it with like cybernetic parts. There's a terrorist organization that she has to sort of combat in that. But that is, the narrative itself it's told so poorly. If you've read anything by Shiro Masamune, then you'll know that he's very good at world building, and the ideas and the concepts that he utilizes and sort of tries to structure a story around are really good, but the actual execution of that story it's never any good. Never any good. And this has to be him at his worst in terms of actually trying to tell a cohesive narrative, which this is absolutely not. But the majority of it is just techno jargon, kind of alluding to semi-science fiction technologies that now do exist, but at the time that this was written, there was sort of science just kind of coming into their own. It's basically just him having a big nerd off over different technologies that at the time didn't exist but were sort of coming into existence, like in the actual real world. So it's just him sort of having this sort of pseudo-science philosophizing kind of introspective interrogation of his own love for science fiction. It's a very insular manga. It came across to me like maybe something that was just written personally for him. It's not accessible at all to just your common reader. I've been reading manga for years, and I did not find it accessible at all. I would normally sort of have something nice to say about like maybe the artwork, just to kind of give it the benefit of the doubt. But even though it's all sort of rendered in like full color, like the artwork is, I mean, it's mostly just fan service. I mean, there's like a panty shot and, you know, tits and ass on literally every single page. You know, it's you could definitely see that Shiro was sort of venturing into a completely different arena of artistic endeavor. You know, he's really into them hentai, and it just didn't do it for me at all. It was far too distracting for. I mean, it's not like there was much of a story to be distracted from. Any opportunity for me to sort of understand what was going on. Oh, I think my connect's bad. Let's see. Am I still playing? I think I'm still playing. Still live? Still live? Okay, yeah, we're still live. Okay. I just got a notification saying that my connection was bad. It was trying to reconnect me. Also, hi, hello, Master25. Sorry. I was sort of rambling on. And DB Ataku. Thank you. Yeah, I'm still good. Thank you. Cheers. Nice one. Anyway, yeah, this I would not recommend this really to anyone, even an ardent Shiro Masamune fan. I got this just for the sake of completion, and I didn't have high hopes for it because I'd heard just on the grapevine that it wasn't a particularly interesting series, and it didn't even meet my low expectations. It was worse than I thought it was. And as I was saying, like the artwork is, I mean, there's no nudity, even though it looks like nudity. There's no actual nudity, but just look how busy and messy it is, and you can't tell what the hell's going on. I mean, a lot of the panels and even the action scenes in their full color are just really blurry and smudgy, and you can't really get any semblance of what's going on at all. It's so incoherent. And it really doesn't give me any sort of hope for any other Masamune manga that I might read. I mean, I don't think he even sort of creates manga anymore. He just sort of does like artwork for like video games and sort of writes stories and stuff. Like I know he's got some Crimson Pandora Shell or something. I can't remember what it's called, but that's done by a different artist. I think he's just the script writer for that, I guess. I think most of what he does is just sort of concept art and stuff. I don't think he actually writes anything anymore, like actual sort of serialized manga. And maybe that's for the best, because you know he's a great artist. Don't get me wrong, and he really loves he loves the female body, evidently in this. You know, I mean, it's just all just it's too titillating. It's far too titillating. And it just doesn't have any sort of understandable story at all. It's bad. It's very bad. One of the worst manga I've read by a mile. Okay, I'm gonna turn on my lights. It's getting kind of dark. There we go. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Let's quickly read the comments. Spriggan manga, yes, yeah. I saw Seven Seas. I'm really looking forward to Spriggan. I'd read a bit of Spriggan in one of the really old Viz Spectrum sort of collected manga that sort of, it was like a manga catalog from the early 90s, and it had a couple of chapters of Spriggan, or what it's called Striker in English. It had a couple of chapters of Striker in there, and I just loved the sort of cyberpunk aesthetic. It was like the first sort of cyberpunk I'd read and experienced. It was hyper violent. I thought it was so cool. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Spriggan. I've also got the got the movie on DVD, but I've never actually watched it. I've seen like clips and like the trailer and stuff, but I've never seen it. But nevertheless, I am really looking forward to Spriggan. And of course, Yokohama shopping trip, or Yokohama shopping log, whatever it's called in English. I'm super stoked for that. I'm really looking forward to that. I've wanted that. I've had my eye on YKK for about 10 years, because it's been on Anime News Network's top 10 voted manga like for the longest time. It's been up there for over 10 years, so it's something I've always had my eye on. So to know now that it's actually getting an official English release, I'm so excited, so excited. And Seven Seas is a publisher that I've never really sort of even bothered looking at. Ever since they started doing their classic collection manga, like with Devilman and the Leiji Matsumoto stuff, I've just had no interest in them. None of their titles have really sort of piqued my interest. With all the isekai and sort of romance and sort of just otakudom, sort of oriented series. I've always been sort of like a Viz, Vertical, Kodansha, Dark Horse sort of guy. Basically every publisher except for them. But yeah, now they're really pulling out the big guns. I'm looking forward to anything else that they do release. Any more announcements? I keep up to date with things that they announce on Twitter, like everyone else. Yeah, you're right, man. Seven Seas is killing it with the old manga. Anytime I see an older manga like 80s, 90s, even 70s or 60s manga get announced, I'm on that like a fly on shit. It's brilliant. I don't think it would rate this so badly if it wasn't attached to Ghost in the Shell and it was just separated with any other title. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Shiro Masamune is a powerhouse of a name already, so he's up there with like artists like Katsuhiro Otomo and Katsuya Terada. So you expect a premium product. Like there's an expectation there because they've already set the bar so high with previous series and things that they've worked on. I'm just obviously just talking about Shiro Masamune here. He's already set the bar so high with things like Ghost in the Shell and arguably you could say Appleseed and Orion, Dominion, those kind of series. That I expect something great from it, and yeah, I was disappointed. As I for anybody else who's watching, me and Bakamatsu both read this together. We did like a joint read on it. And we both thought it sucked because it did. Anyhow, moving on. The next thing I read was a little one-shot single volume, Sadako at the End of the World. I like sort of horror cuteness. Like it's basically it's an amalgamation of cute sort of moe characters with Sadako from The Ring. If you've seen The Ring or the Japanese version Ringu, then you know exactly what this character is. The creepy girl that comes out of the well out of the TV. If you watch her video, then you get a call saying 7 days, you will die in 7 days. So I've always been kind of entranced by Asian horror, like Japanese and Korean horror movies are just the best anyway, I feel. I love that sort of stuff. So this basically is set in the future. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world where the premise is these two young girls, this little girl and her older sister on the cover there, come across an old TV set with a video in it, and they've never seen it before. The building that they're in is completely bombed out or just destroyed, and the TV is the only thing that's left before the electricity goes off. So they decide to watch this video. Sadako comes out, and I guess perhaps on account of them being desensitized to all violence, they don't register her as a threat. They just see this girl come out of the TV and like, oh cool, you've got long hair and you're another person and we haven't seen people in a while. You want to be our friend? And Sadako's like, wait, what? So Sadako, she can't talk. She sort of uses this iPad to sort of communicate with them, and it's this sort of semi-scary, dark, Tim Burton-esque story of them sort of traveling through this world looking for other people, coming across like hairdressers and an old lady and just other sort of people who are trying to survive, and all the while Sadako has got this sort of internal monologue going on, as she's sort of deliberating whether or not to protect the children or kill them, because her function, her primary modus operandi is cursing people. Her she's an evil spirit. It is within her nature to curse people, and she's sort of presented with this moral dilemma of these young cute girls who don't see her as a threat, and then she has this sort of cognitive dissonance sort of going on internally within her, which is sort of makes the whole thing interesting. I'm not going to spoil the ending, obviously, but it does have an interesting ending, as you would imagine with a character like Sadako. It does get dark, it does get very dark at times. But it's sort of interspersed with cute moments, like Sadako at the hairdresser, and you never get to see her face, so all of her sort of actions and the way she emotes is done in this sort of caricature sort of way, the the sighing and the sort of strands of hair sort of characterize her annoyance at certain things. So you do get to see her almost like a moe Sadako, which is kind of weird, but quite funny as well. Let's try and find another example. So here's when the girls meet her for the first time. Ooh, wowee, yeah, it's Sadako. Let's try and find another cute moment with Sadako. You get to see another ghost as well, which is pretty cool. Another ghost from Japanese folklore. I mean, the artwork is really, really nice. I didn't expect much from the artwork because it just seems like one of those sort of throwaway sort of series. Maybe an author has not really worked that much on other series, but the artwork is really, really pleasant. Here's the other ghost that they find, another sort of Japanese legend of another girl in a well. He does a really good job of sort of characterizing them. Here's a sort of example of Sadako sort of deliberating with herself. What is her relationship to these girls? What is her purpose going forward? If humanity is dying out, then what becomes of her curse if there's nobody else left to curse? Will she sort of fulfill her purpose? So yeah, it's an interesting little story. I did really enjoy it, and there is also another Sadako themed moe sort of work manga that I've got on my wish list as well. That it's not by the same author, but it looks like it's sort of in the same vein as this. So yeah, I don't regret picking this up at all. And it took me about 20 minutes to read this. I mean, it's quite short anyway. It's like a typical sort of Yen Press release, but it's a very quick read. So if anything, it's not something that I would recommend you pick up physically, because it's so read, you don't really get that much out of it. So if it's available digitally, then you can sort of bash it out. Talking about digital series, obviously it's not something I own, so I can't physically show you, but I subscribe to Weekly Shonen Jump this month. Oh, hello, McPuffin Muffin. Thanks for joining. DB Otaku, we never ask how is Sadako. We always just run and hide. Exactly, Sadako is a person too. I do like Sadako. I think Sadako and Kayako from The Grudge are just so cool in my eyes. But yeah, we never ask how she is. Maybe that's all she needs. Maybe all she needs is a hug and a haircut. Puffin, what's that, like a parody of The Ring? No. It's, I mean, it uses Sadako from The Ring. But yeah, I guess you could say it's sort of a parody, but not a parody in that it sort of it bends the rules of the sort of ghostly powers that she has. I mean, she is very much still Sadako and a very serious threat to those around her. the comedy really comes from the girls who don't register her as a threat. So yeah, I guess you could say it is a parody to a degree, but it's still very much the same Sadako. She's not like it's not like other parodies where you see where like the main threat is sort of neutered, to sort of remove that element of horror. Like it very much is still like horrific. It's got a sort of nice juxtaposition between comedy and cuteness and like terror, like absolute terror. But yeah, as I was saying, this month I subscribed to Weekly Shonen Jump, and I was reading a couple of one shots on there, just to sort of kind of get some flow going, I guess. And I read probably my first ever isekai, I guess, like a in terms of like a modern iteration of an isekai. And it was that time I got reincarnated as Yamcha, the the Dragon Ball Z isekai. I mean, it's only one volume anyway. It's like 3 chapters. Like I read it in like half an hour. It's really quick, short manga. But there's so much that they could do with it, but it just rushes through the entire thing. And it's basically that's typical sort of isekai setup where main character falls down the stairs trying to get a peek of a hot girl that he sees. Knocks himself out, and then he wakes up and he's Yamcha. He just wakes up in a field in the Dragon Ball universe, and it starts in like early Dragon Ball, just after they've defeated Emperor Pilaf, I believe. So it starts there, just before the last tournament. Before no, it's after. In fact, I think it's after Goku defeats Demon King Piccolo. It's at some point in Dragon Ball anyway, just before they get to the tournament where Goku fights Piccolo Jr. But it doesn't like you don't get to see Yamcha throughout like all of his appearances in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. It just sort of shows you like the highlights, like him fighting the Cybermen, because basically the premise is the main character is already a Dragon Ball fan. He dies, and then when he wakes up in the Dragon Ball universe, it's like, oh shit, why am I Yamcha? Like Yamcha is the shittest character. It's a meme at this point, like how much Yamcha dies. Everyone shits on Yamcha, right? So his goal is basically trying to really beef up Yamcha, train a lot, just so he doesn't befall the same. He basically doesn't follow the same errors that Yamcha does. Like he doesn't, he tries not to get killed by the Cybermen, tries not to get killed by who else does Yamcha get killed by? Like the androids. So it's basically him trying to power up and sort of alter the course of Yamcha's actual sort of story in Dragon Ball. So it's interesting to that degree, but it doesn't do enough with it. There's so much more that it could do with that story, and maybe the artist only was sort of commissioned, I guess, to do a single volume. I mean, something like this I think really could have worked if it was maybe 4 or 5 volumes. Could really flesh out that humor, because that dying and waking up as Yamcha, I mean, that is ripe for the taking. That's ripe for the picking. There's so much humor, so many jokes you can think around that, and it just doesn't utilize the evident, clear humor that you could get out of that situation. I wanted a lot more from it, and I was sadly disappointed. So yeah, that's actually the plot point as well. Him trying to make sure that Bulma doesn't fall in love with Vegeta. Because he's the kid who he actually is in the real world. He's just a young horny teenager, and it does show like his interactions with Bulma, like, oh shit, I want Bulma, I don't want Vegeta to get her. So yeah, that yeah, asking the important questions. Yeah. So like when he first meets Bulma, it's like, oh my god, she's really cute in real life. And like his fight with the Cybermen is really good, because obviously he's already read Dragon Ball in the real world, so he knows exactly what's going to happen. So Yamcha is the one that goes to train with King Kai, and by the time the Saiyans come, he kicks the shit out of them. Like he kicks the shit out of Nappa, and basically him and Goku double team Vegeta. Like they kick the shit out of Vegeta. Unfortunately, you don't get to see any of the stuff that happens on Namek. Like you never get to see Yamcha fight Frieza or anything like that. Like I said, there's so much more that I could have done with it. I would have loved to have seen Yamcha kicking the shit out of Frieza. That would have been brilliant. It only goes up to a certain point, and that's really, yeah. It does like a really long time skip, and it's like, oh man, you just skipped out all the interesting parts. I wanted to see the part where Yamcha gets like fucking gutted through the chest by Dr. Gero. But you don't get to see that. You don't get to see him fight the androids or anything, which is a shame. You only get to really see like what happens in the Saiyan saga, and that's really about it. So yeah, I read that. I also read another one shot. It was a One Piece one shot that basically covered the chapter of Vivi's adventure at the end of the Alabasta arc in One Piece. And it's just basically the exact same thing, like panel by panel. Like the dialogue's the same, the panels are the same, everything's the same. It's just in a different art style. So it was okay for what it was. It was just like a single chapter. I can't remember what it's called. I think it was just like One Piece one shot Vivi's adventure. I can't remember the artist's name. The artwork was nice though. It was nice to see characters, the same characters that I love rendered in a completely different style. Though Luffy didn't really look. Luffy looked more like Ichigo, which sort of threw me off because Luffy sort of has that sort of cartoonish, babyish sort of face and like expression. And the art style didn't really lend itself well because it was a much more sort of realistic art style. I guess more realistic than One Piece normally is. I guess it was more of a sort of conventional Bleach style art style where the characters are a lot more on model. Like there's not that much super deformation in like the characters' faces and stuff like that. They're a lot more sort of on model to like what human would normally look like. It was a nice art style, but I don't think I could read the entirety of One Piece in that art style, as it just doesn't really fit. Very much accustomed to the normal sort of Oda art style. Let's see questions. I like Yamcha. Shame Power Creed edges him out along with other characters. Well, yeah, that was kind of one of the things they addressed as well, because the main character, sort of as Yamcha, was acutely aware that humans become woefully obsolete. At the point that Saiyans, start to come in like Vegeta and Super Saiyans and all that sort of stuff. So he was aware of his impending relegation to obsoleteness. So that was an interesting dilemma, but not one that was thoroughly explored. The next one shot I read on the Shonen Jump app was Look Back by Tatsuki Fujimoto. And that was amazing. That was really, really good. Very emotional. Basically about two artists in like primary school or elementary school, for anyone outside of the UK. One is I guess technically better than the other one. Like one of them has more technical skill than the other. And it's basically they sort of start off with this. There's like a one-sided rivalry, but it turns out that the one who is technically better is actually a massive fan of the one who has the one-sided rivalry, and they sort of start this really nice friendship, and then sort of grow up together, writing manga together, and just being young girls, in primary school, middle school, and then high school, and trying to get serialized with a big publisher, and eventually they go their separate ways because the main character, she wants to focus on being serialized, whereas the other artist who was doing predominantly like the background artwork, she's grown in confidence in order to sort of pursue her own ambitions and wants to become professionally trained, and decides to go to art college. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's very emotional. Yes, Look Back is a one shot. Yeah, it's coming out physically as well. DB Otaku. There are. I mean, it's a short one. There's about 140 pages, but it does. I mean, for how short it is, it does cram in a lot of sort of development and emotion. And like I said, I'm not going to spoil it, because if I spoiled it, then you might as well not read it. Considering how short it is, but it's very emotional, and that's all I will say. I'm not going to say what kind of emotional. I'm not going to say it's like an emotional high or an emotional low. It's very emotional. And if you've read Chainsaw Man, Tatsuki. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Chainsaw Man. I did really enjoy it, and it was very bingeable. But the characters were a little bit too idiosyncratic, I guess you could say. The characters were a little bit too idiosyncratic for my taste. A little bit too psychologically flawed, unusual. I couldn't really. I mean, like Denji, can't relate to him at all. The guy needs therapy. Many of the characters in Chainsaw Man need therapy, whereas look back, they were just sort of normal kids, just normal people. It was a lot more grounded in reality as well, given that it's set in reality, whereas Chainsaw Man is obviously it's fantastical, demons and all that sort of stuff. But if you read Chainsaw Man, then I reckon you'd sort of enjoy this, because it does have that sort of quirky narrative flair that Fujimoto tends to employ, or at least that I've heard he does employ in his stories. I've heard that Fire Punch is very much sort of akin to that sort of weird sort of narrative style where the characters are very quirky and out there. Look Back isn't really like that in terms of the actual characters, but the story itself is, and the artwork is quintessentially like his sort of style, like scratchy, sort of sketchy. But given that it's a one shot, evidently he had a lot more time to sort of refine the art style itself. So the artwork is actually really nice. But yeah, I highly recommend it, whether you pick it up physically or digitally. It's definitely worth it. And I think that's everything that I read on the Shonen Jump app. Did I read anything else? I do have things in my favorites. I'm going to read Kawa and Sandland by Akira Toriyama, as I'm not able to come across either of those physically for a good deal. And I've got a couple of other things in my wish list as well, and my favorites as well that I'm going to read. I might read. I'm going to read Spy Family or Spy X Family, because that looks pretty cool. I'm going to start reading Dan Da Dan as well. I'll give a couple of chapters of that a try, as I am going to be. I mean, I'm not one to kind of pick up sort of Shonen Jump titles anymore, because you never know how long they're going to go on for. So I don't like committing myself to them. I prefer sort of shorter series. But I've seen some of the artwork from Dan Da Dan, and it looks incredible. And I think Spy Family looks really funny, and I need more comedy in my life. Generally, all of my stuff is super serious and just depressing. So I do like a good comedy, and Spy Family looks like it might tick that box. So I'm going to read those. Probably maybe talk about them next month or something if I've read any chapters. But onwards and upwards. More of the physical stuff. Let's talk about this. Yes. So finally read Gone by Masashi Tanaka. This is a 7-volume, or I guess 3 volumes in these omnibus. This is the Italian sort of special edition box that was everyone was harping on about last year. And Gone has always been something that's on my radar. Kodansha are the ones who release it in English, but they were just the single volumes, and they were just the standard, edition. Nothing too special. So I'd always sort of overlooked picking up, like, I'll pick it up next time, or oh yeah, I can see that on the shelf, I'll pick it up next time. It was one of those things that I always put on the back burner, but finally got around to picking this up as I saw this in another YouTuber's collection. I was like, oh my god, that's beautiful. And considering that Gone is a wordless manga, it doesn't really matter what language you buy it in. The only translations are the chapter titles, which really don't have any bearing effect on understanding the story at all. And given that the series is very entirely driven by its artwork, you can hazard a guess as to what the chapter titles are. But again, you don't need to understand the chapter titles in order to understand the different narratives. And it's essentially just, let me pull out the volumes. It's essentially about this little dinosaur here. I mean, you don't really know what sort of dinosaur he is. I mean, it's some kind of sauropod, I think, like a baby Allosaurus or something. He's a carnivorous dinosaur anyway, and he's uh, a very caricature sort of stereotypical representation of a dinosaur, like little sort of bloody chicken arms and big feet, and more full of teeth. But for the he's got that sort of ugly cuteness about him. Yeah, here we go. Here's a sort of like a better picture of him. So you can see he's very cartoonish, and it's basically him. I mean, you can only sort of, there's no real explanation as to why he's in this world, because it's not set in prehistoric times, or at least you don't think it's set in prehistoric times. It's set when modern animals already exist, like wildebeest and lions and bears and tigers and sharks. Well, sharks have been around for millions of years, but animals that we know and animals that exist today exist with him. So you can only sort of surmise that maybe he was, I guess, frozen or something, and survived the KT extinction or something. There's basically no explanation as to why a dinosaur from the late Cretaceous period exists today. He's practically immortal. I mean, nothing can sort of hurt him at all. The premise is short stories of him. I guess the core framework of each story is Gon as an apex predator makes friends with a downtrodden, beta sort of or omega, basically like a loser animal, and through Gon's actions and sort of I guess teaching, he teaches his new friend to sort of stand up for themselves, sort of become the apex predator that they're meant to be. So it's Gon traveling all around the world, meeting new friends, different types of animals, and they both come across a common enemy, and they have to overcome that common enemy or obstacle together. And then at the end of it, Gon goes his separate ways, and his new friend has a new sort of newfound confidence in themselves. So that's kind of basically it. Each story sort of revolves around that core sort of premise. I mean, some other sort of deviate from that. Sometimes it's just Gon by himself, fighting an enemy, or sort of like whooping a lion, and making using a lion as his steed. It's like Gon is basically this immortal being. He's basically Gon acts like a natural disaster in this manga. He destroys forests, and he's incredibly strong. Like he can climb mountains with his little claws and stuff. He's incredibly powerful. And a lot of the humor revolves around the trouble that Gon inadvertently causes for like all of the animals around him. Like he creates flash floods by accident, and like all the animals are mad at him, and he's completely oblivious. He's completely removed from the catastrophe that he is. So a lot of, he's not malicious in any way. He's just clumsy and incredibly powerful. Like he like makes friends with like little birds and stuff. So he's kind, but he's also an apex predator that has instincts that spell disaster for for many of his perceived enemies. But it's very cute in its execution, and the best thing about it by a mile is just the gorgeously detailed artwork. I mean, look, this is a double page spread that it's just water. You can see Gon there like off in the distance, but it really is just an absolute masterclass of environments and just the world that that exists. It's just so full of life and so vibrant, and even though it's all rendered entirely in black and white, you feel a sense of belonging within it. Like you can really sort of feel that, like you'll be going through a forest, and it's I'm trying to find a really good example of a chapter where he's in the forest and it's so lush, and I mean, just the vegetation, everything is just, there's such attention to detail. I mean, this isn't the example I was looking for, but you can see there he's just in some woods, and God, it's just spectacular. It's utterly gorgeous. Here's a Gon teaching a lion how to hunt, or basically he's using this lion to hunt a wildebeest because he's hungry and he can't run that fast. So he just takes advantage of everything around him. He's so clever. Look, I mean, you can see he's using this lion like a bloody horse. You can see the lion is lamenting his bloody fate. He's like, what the fuck is going on? And he just doesn't give a shit. He's like, I gotta eat and I can't run that fast, so I'm gonna get you to do it for me. And he just pisses everyone off. He's such a nuisance. It's really cute. Here we go. Here's a really funny chapter of him kicking the shit out of a bear just because he needs something to sleep on. It's really funny. It's really funny. Like the bear, like you can see here, like the bear's like, how fucking dare you? Do you know who I am? And he's like trying to get Gon off him, and then like Gon just gives him this vicious stare, like, don't you fuck about. The bear's like, okay. He just resigns himself to this little dinosaur just taking the piss out of him. It's really funny. It's really cute and funny. I really enjoyed it. I mean, 7 volumes of this, it does get a little bit wary at some point. Like sometimes it's like, oh God, it's just the same sort of stuff going round and round again. But the artwork and the comedy more than makes up for it. And considering that it's driven entirely by the artwork, you're not distracted by word balloons or not even sound effects. Everything is just in your mind. You just sort of have to make up the sounds in your head. And because everything's told that way, you pay a lot more close attention to the character's actions and facial expressions, more so than you would any other manga. Because you have to sort of formulate that narrative in your own mind, and it's simply guided by the artwork. It's not told to you. So yeah, the artwork, I mean, if the artwork was any less than what it is, any less technical than what it is, then it probably wouldn't be something that's so universally enjoyed. It sort of fringes on the border between story and art book in that respect. So if you can find this, I mean, I think this has gone back out of print, but Amazon Italy, go on Amazon Italy, or just Google, I guess, Gone, what's it called, collector's box. Get this. It is really good. My favorite story in this, I think, was in the last volume. It's basically Gon and like a gopher and a wolf have to team up against this giant tarantula that lives in this like subterranean lair. And it's a long form story. It's got a couple of chapters, which is like the only sort of instance in this entire manga where there's like a sense of serialization. There's a sequential plot going on, and there's this journey into this subterranean like lair, like coming across like massive sort of insects, and they try to track down this giant spider that's kidnapped the wolf's puppy, like the wolf's cub. And it's one of the emotional stories in it. Is not many of the stories have sort of like emotion in them. They're just more comedy, but this one has like lots of ups and downs. And I highly recommend. I cannot praise this enough. I do want to do a sort of separate review on this as and when I get the time, but definitely something that's rereadable and very bingeable. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So artistically, it's one of the best that you can read. And he goes to every single environment you can possibly think of. He's in the desert. At one point, he's in the deep ocean. He's at one point he's in the Himalayas. Like traversing massive mountains and plateaus. next is in like the Antarctic, chilling with penguins and albatross. Is in every single like environment you can possibly think of. Obviously, within reality, in the world, obviously forests as well. Obviously, this is a desert. I'm just sort of trying to think, top of my head, like where else he goes. Here's chilling with penguins. And there's such a variety of animals as well. It's like reading it's like watching a David Attenborough documentary. It has that same sort of vibe. Like it's just got a real sort of flair of Natural Geographic. It's gorgeous. It's just and anytime he's angry and like really pissed off, like his face just gets all veiny. Like the way that the artwork sort of utilizes this sort of I guess physical storytelling without actually having any context provided by words is really clever. And obviously there's no sound effects, so the artwork has to sort of improvise with like how impact works without hearing like what the sound actually is. So it's really clever. It's done really, really well. I would love to, I don't know if this author has worked on anything else, but I would love to read more of his stuff if anything was ever available. Whew, okay, I've got 3 more things to talk about, I believe. Yep, 3 more things to talk about. Let's just have a quick look at the comments before we continue. DB Attacker, I can see you're quite active in here. Thank you. Yeah, you heard Dan the Dan's really good. Spy Family has a nice blend of humor, action, and mystery. Cool. Gone. Yeah, as I said, no dialogue. It's bloody brilliant. Puffin, I think Gone was published in English by a few publishers, to be honest. There's like 2 or 3 versions. Yeah. I mean, the only one I'm familiar with is the Kodansha one, because I used to see that on the shelves. But yeah, I think it's been published by other publishers now, probably defunct publishers. But yes, it has been published a few times. I like to harp on Amazon, but today they messed up my order and sent me an extra 4 volumes of Berserk Deluxe editions. What? For free? Damn, that's good. Gone, even though it's wordless, sounds quite interesting. Yeah, take the win. I'd say so. Wow, you ordered volume 5 and they sent 5 through 9. Bloody mate, you just got hundreds of pounds worth of free manga there. Jesus, you're lucky. I might try and order one myself. See if they send the wrong stuff to me as well. The art reminds me of Boichi from Dr. Stone. Yeah, I guess it's quite detailed. Highly detailed. Yeah, it's very highly detailed. Considering he's a baby-looking dino, is very expressive in the face. Oh yeah, he's incredibly expressive. I mean, he's a lot more serious than what I thought he would be going in. I mean, his behavior and his actions are very much indicative of, he knows he's the strongest. He's very acutely aware and he takes advantage of that at any point. He'll just walk through like the savannah, like through a pack of lions, and he's like, yes, I'm the boss here. You need to know your place. So he doesn't act in a childlike way in terms of his dominance over other creatures. His immaturity and his childlikeness comes from like how playful he is with like the different friends that he meets. But when it comes to everyone else, war betide them. Like I said, he acts like a natural disaster, and everyone has to basically give him a wide berth because he's incredibly dangerous. But very cool, very cool. My first introduction to Gon was he had like a weird cameo in Tekken for some reason. I think that's where I first heard of Gon as well. His fart move was OP. Oh man. Are there any humans? No, it's all animals, which is why it's kind of difficult to pinpoint where in time this actually is set. I mean, the closest thing to a human you see are orangutans. So, I mean, it could be set anywhere from the last ice age to a couple of thousand years ago, you don't really know. I mean, you don't really get to see any other prehistoric animals. Like you don't get to see like woolly mammoth or smilodons or anything like that, or saber-toothed cats or anything like that. They're all modern animals. So I mean, it's set at some point in the last 1,000 years, maybe, but there are no humans at all, which makes it much more interesting, personally. But yeah, all right. Next, I read. This is a non-fiction manga, and that's Shigeru Mizuki's Hitler. And this is a biography of Adolf Hitler's rise to power. So a lot of it covers his life up to and including before the start of the Second World War. So who was Hitler as a man? What made him become the holy terror that we all know him to be today? And was he always like that, or did something happen? Was there a catalyst? And the answer is yes and no. The cultural climate of Germany and Austria at the time was one of rife anti-Semitism, racism, and ethnic intolerance. And Hitler was born into this. So his rise to power, I mean, there were a lot of perfect accidents that happened, where lots of vacuums in power, and the Treaty of Versailles essentially neutering Germany after the First World War facilitated Hitler's rise to power. He was an opportunist, as Mizuki expertly crafts. It's very detailed. It talks about a lot of his early failures, and just Hitler's tenacity to continue with the push of German and Austrian self-determination. It's not a read for the faint of heart. I mean, if you're not interested in European history, early 20th century European history, then it probably won't be for you. And it doesn't show all of the sort of horrors of the war. I mean, it doesn't really even brush upon a lot of the horrors committed during the Second World War. Like I said, it's much more who was Hitler as a man. What was he doing while all of these horrible things were happening around him? Things that were committed by his subordinates, like Himmler and Hess and Goring and all of the other sort of famous names that we know and despise. Where was Hitler, and what was he accountable for? He was sort of the brain, and everyone else was the limbs. It's like their prophet to a degree. They worshipped him, they feared him, but he was a deeply flawed man, as obviously, but a very vulnerable and weak man. And you can, I mean, it's very apparent from the early pages, even before Hitler's career in politics, when he was a struggling, artist living in poverty. He was unhinged. He was unhinged from day one. And Mizuki tells it that, tells it as it is. I mean, it's very sort of very indicative of Mizuki's style in that Hitler and all of the other characters are sort of cartoonized. They're almost caricatures, but it's set. That they're superimposed in this realistic, truthful backdrop of turmoil that was Germany and Bavaria and Prussia, and this highly volatile region of Europe in a highly volatile time. Just after the Industrial Revolution, and come out of the end of what was then known as the Great War, that we know now as World War One. Hitler's, like I said, his tenacity in rising to power, how he co-founded, the National Socialist Party that became the Nazi Party, how he successfully crushed dissidents within his own party. I think people who wanted to see his downfall because they knew what kind of man he was and what could anticipate what he was going to become. Muff Puffin, is it sympathetic towards him, the narration? No, not at all. I wouldn't. I mean, it's truthful. It presents him as he was, a deeply flawed, narcissistic, megalomaniac psychopath. It doesn't glorify him, or what he achieved at all. I mean, if you know anything about Hitler, I mean, it's historically accurate to say that he was very charismatic and a fantastic orator. His skill for creating a hysteria towards the rest of the world in the German and Austrian youth. I mean, they were all hoodwinked. They were wrapped around his little finger. Hitler knew their vulnerabilities and the psychological vulnerabilities and the paranoia that Germany had for the rest of the world. Its neighbors, Poland and France. Everyone had it in the Germany, and economically and militarily they'd already been neutered by the Treaty of Versailles. They weren't allowed to have their own standing army anymore, and Hitler rebelled against that. He refused, to allow what he saw as the weak German chancellery pay reparations to other countries that he deemed inferior just because they suffered at the hands of Germany during the First World War. So he was the German vanguard against the entire world. That obviously brought on the atrocities during the Second World War. Obviously, he had no tolerance for anyone who wasn't Aryan. He was a white supremacist, and none of that is glorified. It's told truthfully. I mean, if you've read anything by Mizuki, that sort of anything that's sort of Mizuki's departure from his normal sort of comedic and whimsical series like Kitaro, if you've read like Onwards Towards Our Noble Death, then it tells the story very frankly. I mean, I'm due to read Showa History of Japan next, and I expect that to be sort of in the same vein as this, in that it's just a historical account, and that's what this is. Clearly Mizuki did his research on who Hitler was as a man, because even during and after his death, his contemporaries wrote about him. So that there are a lot of contemporaneous accounts, biographies about who Hitler was as a man. Even though the majority of what you see of him is in this sort of propagandist, powerful military, orator. You see him like, up on the podium speaking to thousands and thousands of people in a crowd. There are equally a lot of sort of written documents about from his his contemporaries and his subordinates who just wrote about him, who he was as a character, and what kind of man he was. He had a heavy spotlight on him. So there's a lot of resources to pull from. I imagine there would have been a lot of resources to pull from that Mizuki could sort of craft this retelling of Hitler's rise to power, and what kind of person he was, and how he acted and around his subordinates, and how his subordinates reacted around him. But yeah, it's grim. It's very grim, and ultimately it ends. I mean, it's not really a spoiler because it's just history, but the ending, I mean, it goes up to the point where it's just him and Eva Braun in the Führer bunker, and they're all taking the cyanide pills, and Hitler basically, up until the very end, he refuses to lament his failures. He sees it as the world has sort of slighted him, and nothing is his fault. He doesn't take any accountability. he sees the failures of this Aryan nation that he tried to create. He sees the failure of doing that. He basically blames everyone else, and basically he reverts back to what he was at the start of story. At the start of the story, he reverts back to what he was just a poor, crybaby, essentially. Started the manga as a destitute charity case, and effectively that's how he ends. With a bullet through his brain, tears in his eyes. So it's grim. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not something I would necessarily recommend unless you've got sort of an invested interest in that sort of period of history. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. As a a monument to a very important part of history. So yeah, Shigeru Mizuki's Hitler. It is very much a biography. Don't read this like it's entertainment, or you're not reading this for like a story. It's like a biographical text that just so happens to be in graphic novel format. So yeah, Hitler. It's not something I probably will ever reread either. It's I've got everything that I expected to get out of it. Okay, let's have a quick read of the comments and then talk about the last two things that I read. Seems similar in style to his other work. Yeah, that's as I mentioned. Have you read Mouse? I know it's not a manga, but it's an amazing graphic novel thing. Yeah, well, Art Spiegelman or Spielman, I can't remember his name. He's won so many awards for that. And it's like the mice are the Jews and the cats are the Germans, right? So it's like kind of framed with that in mind. No, I haven't read it, but I know of it. I know how famous it is. Maybe I'll read it one day. I don't know. It's not on my priority list, and that's not just because it's not manga. It's just because I don't want the majority of my a lot of my collection to be just sort of war. I like to have more of an eclectic collection. I don't want to have like a particular focus on World War II specifically. Anyway, the next thing that I read was a sports manga. That's Ping Pong by Taya Matsumoto. So I've got these beautiful semi-hardcover omnibus editions. These are the 2.5 volumes. And this is one of Matsumoto's manga from the 90s. He did this after Tekken Concrete. So he went straight from Tekken Concrete into this. And it's basically, I'm not well versed when it comes to sports manga, so I'm not familiar with all the tropes. I tried to pick them up in terms of, what I assumed were tropes, as and when they came along. And I enjoyed it for what it is. And it's basically, it's for it says in the tin, it's about ping pong. And it's about these two kids, which is a sort of a signature thing that Taya Matsumoto does. He always has sort of like two central, young adolescent characters that sort of represent, a yin and yang, black and white sort of dynamic. Like it's always like a dichotomous central figure, or two central figures, and that's very much like in the vein of this as well. And it's it basically asks the question, what is the difference between raw, natural, innate talent and working hard? Which one is the better of the two? Can you achieve everything just through your own natural, innate talent, or can you achieve the exact same thing and more by working hard for it? And that's the dichotomy between these two friends, these two people, these two young kids who both play ping pong. One has a natural innate talent and doesn't feel any need for self-improvement, because he's already got the sort of cocky arrogance that, well, I'm just going to beat anyone anyway, and I'm naturally good at this. Like, why? There's no room for improvement when I'm already perfect. And then it's got his other friend who's a lot more studious, quiet, reserved, and never had the knack for ping pong, and had an interest in it just through his friendship with with Peko, the one who's naturally gifted, and it's about their sort of, they don't necessarily have a rivalry. They have their own very distinct, separate paths. Throughout the story, they both sort of compete in the same tournaments, and their rivalry sort of comes to, they sort of discover they have a rivalry a lot later in the story. But it's a nice sort of coming of age story. Lots of ups and downs in terms of characters losing confidence in themselves. Like, I got beat by this really cool, really talented ping pong player, and where am I in this? I thought I was naturally gifted. So yeah, Peko and Smile are the two main guys on their own unique journeys, and that's really it, to be honest. I enjoyed it, but it's certainly not my favorite work by Taya Matsumoto, and maybe that I'm just not really that interested in sport or reading about sport. So it was a bit of a slog getting through this. It is a slow burn. I started to really, really enjoy it in the latter half of the last volume. So maybe halfway through the second one of these is when I really started to feel invested in the characters. Everything up until that point was just sort of following the preset formula of this is what it is to come of age. This is what it is to interrogate yourself. Interrogate your own sort of place in this world, and blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. All this sort of typical tropes of coming of age. It was very much just that. And even though I'm not familiar with sports manga and the tropes of sports manga, I am familiar with the tropes of sort of coming of age, and stories focusing around adolescence and their place in the world, that sort of thing. And it's very formulaic in that sense. It sort of it follows the preset model of that. Maybe that's why it felt like a bit of a slog for me. But it was very enjoyable. The artwork's beautiful. The way the sport, the way the action and the movements are rendered is really, really clever. Like the ping pong ball, sometimes it's like a streak of white because it's moving so fast. And the main sound effect in the manga is pack. As you can see there, like the sound of the ping pong ball like whacking against the paddle. One thing that I found difficult with this manga as well is that it goes into like the depth. I mean, it uses a lot of ping pong terminology that it doesn't explain. This character's a chopper. This character's like an expert backhand, and there's this type of rubber on the pad. Just stuff that you'd need to be like really interested in ping pong to understand. Like, it doesn't actually explain, like it doesn't even explain like the rules of ping pong. Like, you just have to guess. You just have to assume that, okay, well, this one's got more points. This character's got more points than this one, so he must be winning. No, there is no index for terminology. You just sort of, because it's not really focused on the actual rules of the sport. It's more it's character centric. Like, it's not a manga about the sport. It's a manga about the characters playing the sport. So the rules, I guess the manga treats it in a way that the rules are superfluous, because it's understanding the rules isn't going to alter your understanding of the progression of these characters. It's not going to change your experience of the outcome. My computer's battery is low. Let me just plug it in. 1 second. Okay. There we go. Right, I'm not going to die. So yeah, it's the term I've seen used a lot is inside baseball. I've heard people describe it as that, as it is very inside baseball. If you're a ping pong fan, then you probably get a lot more out of this. Having understanding the game, like, people win matches in this, and you don't really understand how. Okay, well, you just know that he won the match, and that's it. So yeah, that if there's any negative to say about it, it's that, and obviously the sort of slow burn up until the point that it becomes interesting for me. Smile as a character, I mean, his name is ironic because he never smiles. It was a little bit too lacking in emotion for me. I like my emotional characters. I like my expressive characters. So it's difficult for me to read Smile, just because it's not outwardly expressive. And there's not that much internal monologuing in this. The dialogue is predominantly characters speaking. You don't really get to hear their thoughts all too often. So I couldn't really well, I just didn't really like Smile. Pecco, because he's a lot more expressive and extroverted. I was more fond of him as a character because he wasn't quiet like Smile. He was sort of more open with his emotions and how he felt. So I found his journey, if anything, a lot more interesting than Smile's, because I didn't understand how Smile was feeling at any given point. It was suggested how Smile might have been feeling by the conduit of other characters, like other characters saying, well, he seems a little bit down, or you don't seem very confident, but you never really got that from Smile himself. So yeah, for that, I didn't really like Smile for that either. One thing I really enjoyed was the beautiful color pages at the start of what would have been each single volume. So it starts off with these beautiful sort of like pencil shaded color pages, and the carry on into the story for a couple of pages in each chapter. But they're really nice. I mean, in the very sort of first one, you can even see like the panels as well are different colors, and I thought that was a really nice a nice artistic choice, because they start off as like really young children. It came across as that sort of almost like a coloring book sort of thing. Very childlike. So I liked that. I thought that was really nice. But yeah, it was a really good manga. I mean, this might be something I reread maybe in a couple of years. And yeah, another nice, beautiful Taya Matsumoto manga to my collection. Okay, yeah, this is definitely not under an hour, is it? I do really talk on these things. Timing me. Okay, the last thing I read. I mean, I've got some good things to say about this, and I've got some very bad things to say about this. It's not an entire series. I read the first 4 volumes of Love at 14. This is the Josei manga by Fuka Mizutani, and it is another, what it says on the tin, Love at 14. It's about these 2 characters on the cover whose names escape me. Kanata Tanaka, who is the girl, I think, and Kazuki Yoshikawa, who's the boy. And the 2 middle schoolers who the gimmick is that they're a lot more mature than their peers, and they have to sort of put on this front with their peers that they're a lot more mature than they actually are. And they've been friends for years, like the childhood friends as well, and they can only be sort of goofy and normal themselves around each other. There's a facade, like a mature facade that they put on around their peers, because they're dating and sort of they're coming, they're starting to understand, just through the natural progression of like their own puberty, they're starting to develop feelings for each other. So it's a story about the budding love, the transition between child to adolescent, and these 2 characters realizing, I think I've got an interest in the opposite sex. They were friends before and they didn't really see each other that way. And now that they're sort of going through puberty, it's like, oh wow, what's this feeling? I have a feeling for you. And it's a slow, nice, cute story of puppy love, which is very cute. I very much enjoy that aspect of the story. But it is deeply flawed and deeply problematic for me in some areas. And I can tell that this has been written by probably some diehard otaku because there are some really disturbing age gap romances. There's another character who's like the delinquent in the class, and he frequently gets sort of teased and made fun of sort of by like their music teacher, so the teacher. It's harmless poking fun that she just trying to get him out of his shell, sort of thing. Because he's very sort of he's another 14-year-old kid, and he's very sort of he's lashing out, I guess, just because he's just going through puberty. But that slowly turns into a romance. She starts making really inappropriate advances. The teasing becomes physical. Like she'll like prod him and like brush his cheek or something, and make him blush. I just don't like it. I don't like it because it's presented in a way that it's presented like it should be acceptable. So it's not addressed in this. The inherent problem, how problematic it is, isn't addressed. It's just it's presented as another cute romance, which it's not. There goes my phone. It's not a cute romance at all. It's otaku fetishizing. It's a weird kink that this author clearly has, because that romance isn't the only age gap romance. I mean, I've only read the first four volumes, but I read a review to see how that problematic romance progresses, and apparently it only gets worse. There are other age gap romances as well, and towards the end of volume 4, there's new characters introduced. Another young teenage boy who develops a crush on clearly an older woman who he sees on the bus, like on his way home from school. And I'm guessing that's going to turn into a romance somehow, and I just don't like it. I don't like it at all. It ruins what is otherwise a cute, interesting, central story. The nuclear couple, the main characters, that it's appropriate because they're the same age, and they're not doing anything inappropriate with each other. They hang out in the school like science room, they hold hands, and they blush with each other, and they have the kiss as teenagers do at that age. It's expected of them. Teacher and student relationships is inappropriate. It's just, well, and if the boot was on the other foot, like if it was I mean, I'm sure there's manga out there that depict this, where if it was an older male teacher, having a relationship with a young 14-year-old girl, then that'd be worse in some people's eyes. But just because it's an attractive female teacher having a relationship with a boy, it presents it like it's cute and sexy, and it's not. This woman is grooming him, with her teasing and her prodding and sort of locking. There's an ongoing joke of her locking her and him in the room together and closing the blinds. That's fucked up. That's grooming. And I don't know if it's like a Japanese cultural thing or something where this sort of thing is more acceptable. I know that the age of consent in Japan is a lot lower than here in Britain. I mean, it's 16 in Britain. I think in Japan it's 13 or 14 anyway. So I guess this would be legal, maybe. I don't know. I just don't like it. It just makes me uncomfortable. It's not good. It's not good at all. What can I say? It's another weird, something that starts off innocent and pure and chaste, I guess, and then it just becomes, okay, this manga is an outlet for the author's kinks. It's like a weird doujinshi, and I just don't like it. So I'm not going to continue with this. I mean, these volumes, I picked them up on a whim because they were like £1 a volume. I got the first 4 volumes for £1 because they were selling them off in Forbidden Planet. I mean, I've had these volumes on my shelf for a couple of years now. And I just thought, I read this going out of my comfort zone, and it's, yeah, just no. No, thank you. Not interested. So that's everything. That's everything that I've read in January and February, start of the year. Let's have a quick read of the comments. I see this in my recommended. How's the art? Started reading number 5. Didn't think I'd enjoy it, but I was surprised. Oh, Tai Matsumoto. The art is different. If you're talking about ping pong, at least, it's not typically a manga style. I mean, Tai Matsumoto is heavily influenced by French comic art. So it's not typically manga style at all. It's heavily European in aesthetic. I mean, it kind of turned me off the first time I read a Tai Matsumoto work. I read Tekken Concrete first, and the art, like, it took me a while to get used to the artwork. But the artwork in ping pong is, if you're already used to Tai Matsumoto style, then it's very good, very good. It seems like something that'd appeal more to teenagers. I guess you're talking maybe about Love at 14. Maybe, yeah. I mean, this reads as like a YA novel. I mean, it's completely out of my demographic, even considering that this is a josei series. It's supposed to be for older women. Yeah, it just reads really smutty, and no. I don't like age gap romances, to be honest. That's why I haven't picked up a Bride Story. Yeah, I can see why a Bride Story would turn you off. With that, because it's told in a really interesting way. I mean, obviously I'm not part of that culture, and I know that there's a like marriage in like the Middle East. It's not always predominantly romantic in purpose. You know, the way it's handled in a Bride Story is that young brides are sent out to marry in order to establish familial bonds. They use as sort of like a political bargaining chip between different tribes and clans. You know, in these different regions where people live a nomadic lifestyle. So it's historically accurate, and it's not presented in a way where it's it's not like Love at 14, where it's presented in a way where it's a tool for the author to indulge in a kink. It's told in an honest way. This is what happens. Child brides exist. This is part of their culture, and it's not just entirely about child brides. Even though that's the title. It's also about just how the purpose that marriage serves in that region of the world. Like, it's set in like the Caucasus region, so it's not like the Middle East. It's more it's more like the Caucasus regions, like around like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. The sort of it's like above the Middle East, like near like the Russia, like on the sort of Russian steppes, set in that region. And yes, it's. I remember going into it at first, and I was like, "Oh, where's this gonna go? This might get really awkward." But the way it's handled and the way it's addressed, it's not done in a perverse way. It's more I guess an educational. It's done in an educational style. The author's not indulging in like a fetish, like, oh, this is what I like, and I'm going to write manga about this because it turns me on. It's not like that. It's done innocently and frankly. So even though I don't agree with age gap romances or child marriage like at all, even if it's cultural and traditional, like, I don't agree with it at all. The manga is told in a non-exploitative way, and the main character, the child husband, because it's a reverse age gap, so it's it's an older bride, so she's like 20, marrying a younger husband, like a younger groom. Like the groom is like 12, really young. And there's no romantic connection between them at first. It's about her integrating into his family, bringing her skills with her, because she's a hunter, she's a trained hunter, and the clan that she marries into don't have anyone of like a healthy age who who has her skills. So that there's a functional purpose, survival purpose that she married into that family. And there's no like the relationship between Amir, the bride, and Karluk, the groom, is more like, at first it's more like a this is going to sound even more weird. It's more like a brother sister dynamic, insofar as she cares for him, like not like she dotes on him. They very much interact like husband and wife, but there's no sexual connection between them, because it's acknowledged in that series that Karluk, the boy, is not of age, is not reached sexual maturity. So that's addressed. And even though I don't agree with the fundamental age gap relationship and that being a tradition, the story is told from an observations perspective, whereas the author's like, I want to do this. This is something that I like. I get a kick out of this. I want to be in that. Whereas a bride story is told from more of an educational perspective. And I'm not trying to justify, I see that as an inherent issue, and that some people, will be like, no, not for me. But I really, really enjoy Bride Story. It's a fun. It's told wonderfully. Even if the artwork wasn't as beautiful as it is, just the way the story is told, and the delicacy that it's handled, because obviously Kaoru Mori is Japanese. She's writing about a completely alien culture to her, so she's done her due diligence, done her research, and told fictionalized stories about a different culture delicately and respectfully, and not sort of sugarcoated any of the aspects of that different culture that may entirely be problematic in an urban metropolitan sort of society, normal sort of society that we live in. This is a completely different way of life, not necessarily a wrong one or a right one. It's just the way people lived in the 18th century and long before, and even still today in nomadic tribal regions. It's their way of life, and it's completely normal for them. Anyway, I digress. I just thought it was a really interesting point. Let's have a quick look at the comments. I'm going to wrap up soon anyway. Had my fill of bunny drop. Oh geez, that's another one. That's another one that is just, it's exploitative and self-indulgent. I mean, I haven't read the ending. I read up to volume 5, and I simply heard about how it ends, and I was like, no, not doing this. It's just another weird diehard otaku indulging in her fetishes. I thought it was 12 actually. I still think 16 with the late 20s is a bit off. I think of a 16-year-old as yeah, me too. I think of any teenager as a child. Like I wouldn't date somebody who's 19, just because even though it's fine. I mean, even somebody who's below the age of 25, for me, just mentally is just not. I'm a lot more. I've got a lot more life experience than somebody who is 23. And when I was 20 and 23, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing with my life. I think you need to get to your late 20s, early 30s to really sort of. That's when the adult really sets in, or at least it did for me anyway. Now I can't relate to somebody who's 20, 19, 20. They're just the kids. So yeah, it wouldn't really seem appropriate to me either. Like somebody who's 16 dating somebody like 27. No, it's weird. Anyway, I hope that's been enjoyable. It's been a really fun chat. I've really enjoyed this stream. I watched one, maybe 2 episodes of Bunny Drop. I thought the main guy was looking after his brother's daughter. Does it get weird? Yeah, man, it gets really weird. It's basically his father's illegitimate child. So the child is basically his auntie, and he raises his auntie. I mean, the anime, I don't think it goes all the way to the end. It just sort of covers the cute stuff, just raising a little girl. It's kind of like Yotsuba. Oh my god, can you imagine if Yotsuba ended in the same way as fucking Bunny Drop? Jesus Christ. Better fucking not. But yeah, I mean, I won't spoil it for you just in case you want to read it. But Bunny Drop, I mean, just imagine the worst case scenario. And there you go. That's the ending. Oh no, man. She wants to have a child. That's it. That's her nephew. I know it's like 30 years older than her, but oh man. Oh, that's just fucked. That's really fucked. Anyway, on that unpleasant note, thank you for sticking around, both of you, and whoever else may be watching this. And anybody who's watching this after it's live, then I apologize. I did really intend for this to be under an hour, but there we go. But yeah, thank you. I hope you all have a good rest of your weekend, and well, let's end it there. See you later.